Okay, great. Welcome everyone to Founding Females. Whether this is your first event or you are a returning community member, we are happy to greet you. Founding Females is a community that is sort of an extension of Vida. As you can tell, we are female founders. We passionately care about other female leaders and promoting other founders' work. And so we are people who are building something from nothing and want to support others who are insane enough to do something similar and not have to go it alone. There's so much knowledge among the folks just on the line today, so much power in our networks and amplifying each other's work. And so really the idea behind Founding Females is to lift each other as we rise, as they say, and really not reinvent the wheel, but share the best practices and learnings that we're all discovering along this absolutely crazy founder journey. This is Foram. Welcome to Founding Females. We've been doing this for years, and this is our first event together. I'm so excited.
And on your birthday. That's what makes this the best.
What a treat. What a treat for me.
This is my gift to you. Happy birthday, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm excited that you're here to talk about a kind of deep, kind of challenging and tricky conversation all around ego and what that means. But first, I'm going to embarrass you and read your official bio because we want to tell everyone who you are and why you are an authority to speak on this subject. So Foram Sheth is the Chief Coaching Officer and co-founder of Vida, an innovative career leadership, life, and health coaching company. Foram became a coach after her experience of burning out in her consulting career, can relate to that, and inspired her to help others create careers that are fulfilling, meaningful, and fit to their personal needs and goals. She built Vida to help others stop settling and start living a life they love by making coaching more affordable and results-oriented. That's the official bio. What other things do people need to know about Foram? She's a diehard Harry Potter fan, great karaoke singer. We just learned her default song has transitioned from Avril Lavigne to the Goo Goo Dolls. Big, big transition for Foram, and we're all excited to see that debut. What else? Amazing mother, one of the most generous people I've ever met in my entire life, and inching her way up to a 7 out of 10 on the funny scale. I gave you an extra point.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Welcome, Foram.
Yay. I'm so excited about this.
Okay, good. Well, I love to start these by asking people what the heck got them to entrepreneurship in the first place, and what kind of maybe crazy bone in their body they've identified that they have that would encourage them to pursue something so bold. Knowing your story a little bit and the thing that you say to me all the time, which is, I never wanted to start a business. I just wanted to coach people. And when we got together, I was like, I want to build this business. And you were like, I really want to do the coaching. And I've kind of come to not believe you because you're such a brilliant business operator, entrepreneurial mind, and just leader in general. And so I'm curious, if not what got you here, what is it about you that you think has kept you in entrepreneurship for 6 years and allows you to do it without going nuts?
Oh, okay. There's a lot there to unpack. You're absolutely right. Like, this was not something I even wanted to do. And a lot of that has to do with the backstory of how I grew up. And everyone has something that is how they grew up, the influences they've had that's shaped what they want to do or not want to do. So being an immigrant and not having any stability. And also part of this is my parents sacrificed so much. And so I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to do something where I may not make money. I may fail at this. Is that something that I want to do? And that was, I would say, probably the biggest hesitation I had. It's something I never really entertained because of that reason. I knew that we needed stability. What's interesting is it was actually my dad who encouraged me first. This was before I even met you, Nicole. So I had finished my master's and I was like, oh, I think I want to do, and my coaching certification. I was like, I want to do coaching, but I don't know what that's going to look like. I remember talking to my dad and I'm like, really nervous. I'm like, I think I want to do this thing. If I don't know what it's going to look like. And he asked me, he's like, how much did you spend on your master's program? I gave him a number. He said, great. And so what do you make right now? What's your salary? I gave him my number. He goes, so take that salary number and think of that as your education when you do entrepreneurship. because that is the biggest learning you'll ever have. So that was my first encouragement to say, maybe I'll give this a chance and to open up my eyes. Now, what is keeping me here is honestly you. I would have never taken this leap of faith, because being responsible for other people in many ways, like we have a company to run, we have people who depend on us, whether that's employees or coaches, our clients, that feels like a lot in some ways. And it's like, well, if I mess up, am I going to impact somebody's livelihood? And that's a big thing. I think what gives me a lot of confidence, honestly, is knowing that I have you in this journey together.
Well, I never heard that story about your dad before. And I love that so much, because it's so true. Like and it's just how society has programmed us to believe which investments are sound and which ones are risks. And we will sit here all day and drop tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on schooling. We see this a lot with coaching, and then the investment in something like coaching feels like such a big ask when it's minuscule compared to these other investments, but we've just not been taught that that's the way that we just move through planet Earth. And so I have never heard that, but I love that. And I'm going to steal that from your dad. So thank you. Because it's so true. It's like, great. So we did it for 2 years. It didn't work. You would have invested that same amount in school. And now you have this body of work, this lesson that's going to carry on with you and make you more successful in whatever path you pursue. So I think that's brilliant. I appreciate what you're saying about, the partnership. And it's a huge reason that I'm still here as well. And we're lucky enough that usually the days when I'm up, you're down, when you're up, I'm down, and we balance each other in that. Have you found, though, that your internal risk tolerance and your kind of innate personality is actually aligned to this career path? Even though kind of the pressure you felt in your family may have been different, or do you feel like you've just found ways to overcome it as you've gone?
It's a good question. I think it's a little bit of both. If I'm just operating just me, I take a lot of risks. Like I'll be that one person who's like, everything on red for no reason. Like I just feel like it. But now that there's other people involved, I tend to be a lot more conservative, and I've reeled that in. And I think it's helpful that you and I have a thought partner, and that's really helpful for me. I think the other piece that I have learned is I've always come into this with so much imposter syndrome. Like, who am I to run a business? I don't know anything about business. I don't come from a family of entrepreneurship. That's not what I studied. And so I think historically, I also told myself that story of, what background do I have that tells me that I'm going to be okay at operating a business? What resources do I have? What network do I have? And if I looked at all of those, I'm like, nothing. So what hypothesis or what data points will tell me that I will be successful? I think over time, I've just learned that everyone is winging it and making things up. And so it's like, well, I've learned that I need to trust myself, that I have enough skill sets to figure it out, which is the thing about you, me, I think anyone who's on this call today, is that we're going to make the decision based on the data points we have. And it's not like we're going to make a decision willy-nilly. We're going to think about it, and it's going to be the right thing in that moment.
Right. Yeah. I think that's the most freeing and also unsatisfying thing that you learn is you look at big companies and you just assume there's a right way to do things. Of course, there's best practices. Of course, there's mistakes. But the sooner you realize everyone's just making shit up, the sooner you feel more comfortable not having it perfect and following a process. We just talked about this we're going through annual reviews. We're thinking through what's our philosophy around compensation as a company. And you and I kind of went back and forth on it. Like, we want to have this rule book that's like, this is how much you should pay people. But also even the big companies are making up their own philosophies and tweaking things here and there. And at the end of the day, we have to do, like you said, what's right with the information we have at this moment in time. And we're going to look back and it will be wrong at that point. But there's always an evolution in how the company evolves that kind of shapes how those decisions get made. Okay, so let's get to a little bit around today's topic. I'm really curious of your perspective. Obviously, I see, through my own lens of what my ego does as a leader. you have your own perspective on that, which we'll get to, but you have such a unique kind of landscape in that you're coaching leaders every day. You oversee our team of leadership coaches that are coaching leaders every day. And so you're seeing not just your kind of micro environment, but also at a larger scale, what types of trends are coming up. So before we even get to ego specifically, what are some of the like top 3 most common things that come up in leadership coaching sessions in particular?
I think the first one is everyone just wants to feel validated. Like people just want assurance, like you're doing a good job. We kind of do this with kids constantly. It's like, no, that's good. You're doing a good job. Doesn't matter what level you have. Everyone wants a validation. So that's one thing that I have seen consistently again and again. People genuinely,
I think it's hard or for leaders, I would say, because as you are a contributor, you're getting that validation from your boss. You're getting the, yay, you get a gold star, you created a good work product. And as you move up, there are fewer people telling you that. And so I'm sure there's this kind of gap then in feeling that recognition.
Yeah. And think about it. And also if I can just extrapolate to those who are founders right now, are in the path of thinking about it, your source of validation then doesn't come internally because we're so used to it coming from others. If you don't have anybody else right now in your organization, then your source of validation comes from your actions or results, which could be how much money did I make? What was the sales? Did I increase my Instagram following by X amount? And in the beginning, you can't measure it that way because you're just starting. And that's so hard. And so it's this, yeah, exactly, Betsy. And you keep setting all of these expectations that are actually unrealistic.
Betsy is my coach, you guys, if this is the Betsy I'm thinking it is. So feeling that one, Betsy.
So okay, validation is a big one.
Seeking validation.
Yeah. This sense of purpose is coming up. And I know purpose can be so fluffy and ambiguous, but it's really everyone wants to know that they're making an impact and whatever impact means for them. Nicole, I know from you, what impact means for you is to build something from nothing. You say that often. You're like, I want to build something from nothing. And that's what impact means for you. So something else that's coming up, I would say often is people, having to identify like, what is impactful for me? What does that look like? And how do I do it? So when we're in the day-to-day of work, it just feels like we're just doing the tactics, answering emails constantly, or going from meeting to meeting. How do you extrapolate that into the answer in that question? Am I doing something that's meaningful for me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this actually came up in my coaching session this week, and I appreciated the reframe. I think a lot as leaders, we get sucked into stuff that we feel, whatever the loud thing is that day, that's like commanding our attention. And what Betsy asked me to think about was like, number one, the constant battle of what's my job, what's not my job, what can only I do? And then what I really liked that she got to, or helped me get to, was how am I choosing where I'm getting involved versus getting pulled into where I have to get involved? And I think that's such a powerful shift to start to make so that you can feel like you are having that impact versus the like end of the day comes and you're like, I don't even know what I did today. I did nothing on the top 3 things on my list, but I was doing stuff. But you don't feel like then it's your choice and that you are having that purpose and impact.
Yeah, I love that reframing. And the third one is confidence. Imposter syndrome, confidence. Am I worth it? Am I doing, is this enough? So that is the one thing consistently. And at first I thought that confidence was so focused on females. I was like, oh, that's like 97% of females experience imposter syndrome. I kept reading all of these studies about it. And I have now come to experience that it doesn't matter who I'm talking to, what their identity is, gender identity is, everyone experiences some sort of confidence imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. I was listening to a podcast. I want to say it was the How I Built This with the MailChimp founder. And he was talking about how he was leading like all hands and was kind of taking it passively, like didn't prepare, didn't really have answers to where the company was going. And all of the people below him were looking to him for reassurance. And he's standing up there going, am I good enough? And I think you think that it's one directional, the bottom up of am I good enough? And you don't realize the person above's thinking the same thing. And so I do think we're all walking into just about every interaction thinking, am I good enough? And that gets amplified at work. Okay, that's really interesting, because I think when we hypothesize about leadership and coaching, you'd think you'd hear a lot more about delegation and time management and all of the kind of tactics around you getting work done. But it seems like the trends, and I always kind of say that there's two wavelengths that we're coaching on. There's the tactical thing that someone comes to us for. I want to grow my Instagram following. I want to get a job. I want a promotion. And then there's the subtext of what that person's actually struggling with that's going to enable that other thing. And so it feels like these confidence, the validation, the purpose, these harder to define things are really at the core of what enables all that other stuff to happen.
Yeah. And I think part of this goes into, we're all human. I think we tend to put each other on pedestals because of our perceptions or what we see on social media, what we know of someone because of someone's title or age or tenure, whatever it is. We put all these people on pedestals and we assume, well, of course they're not dealing with imposter syndrome. Of course they have their life figured out. Like they're XXX of this company. And yet we're all in the same boat. None of us we're all making things up. We're all looking for validation. We all want to feel a sense of belonging. We're trying to figure out how we make an impact. And we're all trying to make sure that we are building that story in our minds and we have that confidence that we're looking for. Even if others have confidence in us, we may not have that same confidence. So I think you're absolutely right, is what's showing up in terms of how when people come to us and they say, I want to be a better leader. To me, that's a symptom. What's a diagnosis of what's coming, where this is coming from? So I love that wavelength that you mentioned, that there's always two things going on. There's a surface level and then what's really underneath the individual.
What's your hypothesis as to why so much of the media and the research that's out there is anchored around women as it relates to confidence and imposter syndrome? Why do you think that's been the focus?
If I had to take a guess, I think one, women are a lot more open to name it. They will say, I'm not sure about that, or I feel, and they'll name that. Whereas I think historically what men may do is they may hide it or push it down. So it doesn't always come to the surface. So it takes a while for us to get there. And I think the other piece is also just our culture and society and what's been enabled around us. We make all these assumptions that man is deeper voice and, like not hunch. You're like, okay, this person has so much more confidence, where I think there's some gender differences right there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. The other kind of thing I was thinking about, because when you talk about ego, and I'm curious of how you define it, but there's the kind of self-esteem part of it. And then it feels like there's two sides to the coin, like the self-confidence and then the insecurity, and they're interconnected. And I think one influences the other. And I feel sometimes you've probably seen people like this, where the most insecure people are the loudest voice in the room or taking up the most space in certain ways. And it takes a minute to recognize that the reason behind that behavior is the lack of confidence. And I wonder if sometimes the way that manifests for men versus women can be different, to your point of that kind of explanation and authenticity and vulnerability versus the overcompensation in some ways. Okay, so let's talk about then, how do you help leaders as they are battling this kind of two sides of that coin, either the behaviors and how their ego is manifesting or that kind of deep-rooted insecurity?
Yeah, I think I first want to just separate the two and define it a little bit more. To me, ego comes into play when we feel like we need to To me, it comes into play when we feel like we need to prove ourselves to somebody else.
Okay.
Whereas an insecurity to me is us questioning our abilities. So one is me questioning myself, thinking I'm not good enough. There's these feelings around it. Whereas an ego is about, I need to prove myself right. Ego generally comes in the form of defensiveness. It comes in the sense of it's an external look. So you can see ego, you can feel ego from somebody, whereas you may not feel someone else's insecurity. That depends on how other people want to manifest it, right? Like right now, I might be feeling insecure, but you may not know that. You may not see that because that's very internal, whereas ego is very much based externally.
Interesting.
That's my perspective on that. As I think about how ego shows up, I think ego is also very much rooted into the story that we tell ourselves. It's wanting to, so for example, I'll give a personal story. For me, my ego shows up when I feel like I haven't done, so it starts with an insecurity, which is, am I contributing enough to the business? We talk about this all the time, you and I. Mm-hmm. My insecurity is, am I carrying my weight? Am I doing what I need to as a co-founder, as your business partner? That's my insecurity. Where this might come up is, let's say I was supposed to follow up on something on a proposal and I forgot. And Nicole, you may come up to me and you're like, Foram, did you ever reach out to that person? Now my ego is going to be triggered so this is a temporary moment. My ego might get triggered and think, you don't need to micromanage me. It was on my list to reach out to them. So now you're going to see these form of aggression. The way it shows up for me is these aggressive behaviors where I get defensive. I tell this story like I was going to do it just to validate myself. And it's a way for me to cover my insecurity because I don't want that to come out.
Yeah. Yes. So when I initially was asking around, how do you help other leaders? So it sounds like there's kind of two pieces to it. There's what's the deep-rooted insecurity, and then what's the manifestation of the behavior in response to that. I'm guessing a first component of that is bringing awareness to it for others, because you're obviously such a self-aware person. We talk about this all day long. And so you recognize that doesn't mean you control it in every situation. Yeah. None of us are perfect. But you can identify that that's the correlation there. My guess is the first step in coaching someone through this would be to help them identify, how does that look?
How does that look? And then the second part is the reason why we show up with defensiveness or aggression, whatever your kind of mechanism is of when ego gets in the way, is because we don't feel secure enough to name that it's an insecurity, that it's something that we may have a blind spot on, or it's something that we want to work on. So this is where I would say to my clients, one, recognize the difference between the two. When someone is calling you out, it's okay for you to say, I'm trying to do, that is something I'm very hyper vigilant on, is to make sure that I am pulling my weight. And this was triggering for me, but you're absolutely right. I need to take responsibility and own it. That's a lot harder to do because that means you have to acknowledge your insecurity. Now you're tying them together. Mm-hmm. And this is where vulnerability comes in. That is an important thing and a really hard thing for people to name and own up to.
It really is. I was writing the email that many of you may have read, kind of announcing this event that goes out in our newsletter to lots of people. And I was listing my list of things where I kind of self-identify when my ego's flaring up. And it was hard to even put that out there publicly and admit that, like, when I catch myself caring more about if I'm getting credit or recognized for something than achieving the goal, I know I'm like pure in ego land and I got to get out of there. But that's hard to say, that sometimes I care that much about being recognized for something or getting credit for something. Like, it's so silly, but it is what leads to those behaviors. And so you have to call it out and you have to recognize it to be able to combat it. But it takes a lot of vulnerability and really seeing the sides of yourself you don't want to see, to be able to do the work.
Yeah. And if we keep going with it for you, it's, so let's say your ego, I want to take credit for it. Mm-hmm. What's the insecurity that's building from that?
It's that I don't think that I'm good enough. And so I need this external recognition that, yes, I did achieve that, or did that thing, or it was my idea, or whatever the thing is.
And that insecurity is also hard for us. And I'm making an assumption right now. That's hard for you to come to terms with. It's like, why am I feeling so insecure? That's such a silly thing to be insecure about. So you're already at battle with yourself of this insecurity that you have. Mm-hmm. So think about how impossible it is to then just name it and let other people know, where you're like, I can barely accept this of myself.
Totally. Did you all see what Foram did there, where she just started coaching me? This happens all the time.
Sorry.
No, I loved it. I always love it. I'm so lucky to be surrounded by such brilliant coaches. Okay. I want to talk about the vulnerability and authenticity piece, because I think it's tricky. And we're told this advice all the time, that you should be vulnerable as a leader. You should share your challenges. Even what we're doing right now, I think is so valuable. And also, there have been studies that show when someone already challenges or questions your credibility, and then you express a vulnerability, they see you as less credible. When they already see you as credible and you express a vulnerability, they have a positive reaction to that, see you as more credible and have more likability. And so it's a little tricky, especially as someone who maybe does have imposter syndrome, or is new, or is starting out and building their credibility, to say, I'm going to jump right to being really vulnerable about all these fears. And particularly as a leader, when some of those vulnerabilities might be around performance of the business, or how you're feeling, and wanting to show up as instilling confidence while still being honest. How do you personally walk that line? And what do you see as effective in leaders who do show vulnerability?
Yeah. My advice is that don't show vulnerability unless you've established credibility. It's exactly how you stated this question. And it's so true. Vulnerability is accepted because we have faith and confidence in the leader. But if you haven't taken the time to establish confidence in someone, or show that you have the subject matter expertise, that's not the time to open the Camino, Nicole. Don't you love that language?
Our favorite corporate
Nicole
jargon.
loves consulting jargon. But really, in kind of all honesty, so I'll define credibility just for the purposes of making sure we're all on the same page. Credibility is your subject matter expertise. It's what you know. Mm-hmm. Let's say I'm new to a role, or I've onboarded someone for the first time, and they know nothing about me. They don't have my resume. I am meeting them for the first time. They know nothing about me. In that moment, it's really important for me to establish my subject matter expertise. And that could come through whether you say, I've been in this industry for 10 years, or I've worked with this client, whatever it is that's going to bring that credibility. Once you have that foundation, only then it's okay to be vulnerable. In fact, it's encouraged to be vulnerable, but when that foundation is strong. Because when you do then have that vulnerability and you show that, people will say, wow, I just love how human Nicole is being. I also know that I have full faith in Nicole. Because that's the next line that people have in the thought process they have in their head. They just don't say that out loud, which is, I appreciate you being vulnerable, and I have faith in you, and I know you're going to get us there because you are X, Y, and Z. And these are the traits that you have.
That's interesting. How do you do it? How do you decide what to share and what not to share?
When I think about what I should share, which is, I never want anyone to question the confidence in the business or the confidence in me. I will share that there's a plan. So kind of, here's what needs to be true, that there's still a plan, that we are all in it together, that you're the right person to go through this. Those are all true. Those are facts. The how we're going to get there, what it's going to look like, those are the ambiguous pieces in which I will share the vulnerability. I know it's a difficult time right now. We don't know exactly how this is going to pan out. We don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I trust that this is going to be the right place to go because you have the right skill sets to help me get there. And I believe in us and this mission that we have. Mm-hmm. So I never want anyone to question their ability. I never want anyone to question the organization or what they're part of. You never want anyone to question that. The pieces in which you want to showcase that human side, the vulnerability is, we don't know. We may not know what the outcome is going to be. And even if it's the worst case scenario, it's okay. And here's why it's okay. And so that's really where you're instilling that confidence. That's what I will do.
Yeah, I like that. I think what you're getting at is we know, almost like we know what we don't know. Like we've thought through where the gaps are. We've thought through what could go wrong. If it goes wrong, there's still a plan. We're going to react. Yeah. But here's the pieces that we don't know, or here's where we were wrong, which is a lot of times a hard thing to admit for leaders. I think for me personally, also, I'm super happy to share. And maybe it is because we have 6 years of credibility with our team, the pieces that I'm still working on as a leader, or where I've screwed up and saying, hey, here's where I went wrong, but here's what I'm doing about it. So same way with myself under construction as the business is.
Yeah. And I think you do a great job of being vulnerable. And you may not even know this, but you are formulaic in how you do it. You always make sure that everyone knows where we're headed as an organization. It's like, we know what's true. We know where we're headed as an organization. That's not changing. We know that we have the best talent. That's you. That's not changing. And then those macro levels, like you do such a great job of putting the structure around it and knowing like, that's steady, that's there. And then it's the inside, the micro pieces of, these are the pieces that either this is a strategy that worked or didn't work. We don't know exactly how we're going to get through the strategy. You do a great job every time when we're talking about how we're feeling. And we're very transparent as an organization, which, our coaches and the team who are on the call can attest to.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think the past 3 years, probably for everyone, has been forcing us to use that muscle because no one knows anything anymore. And the only thing we know right now is that stuff's going to change. And even when we kind of went into this year being like, well, we made it through 2020 and 2021, like, try us. And then the world did. And so, yes. I think there's now an expectation around that. And it's really forced us to develop this skill set that I think it will continue to serve us. We talked a little bit about it. Any other examples you have, either in yourself or in leaders, that you've seen are common ones for how ego shows up when people are feeling that twinge of insecurity?
I think I'm probably not going to answer your question, but I'll answer something else
answer
instead.
A different one.
You know me, just like winging it.
I'm truly ornamental here, Foram.
What I was going to share is I kind of want to go back to the vulnerability piece, which is, to me, that's when ego comes in the most, is because it almost feels like it's a very personal thing, right? As a leader, as a founder, this was a strategy I bet on. It didn't come to fruition. Ego comes in because you're like, wait a minute, I was wrong. Mm-hmm. And then you try to, the common mistake is justifying that you were wrong and why you were wrong and all other factors that were outside of your control. It's like, well, if COVID didn't happen, I would have been right. If this didn't happen, I would have been right. That is killer for you and your credibility. Because when you're talking about mistakes and vulnerability, and then your ego comes in to defend, now you just made this whole thing about you. And guess what? None of this is about you. It's about your organization. It's about your clients. It's about your team members. I think that's the other piece, that it's in these trying times when ego really comes into play and we want to just point fingers and blame others, because we don't want to be wrong.
Mm-hmm. And you cannot learn if you're operating in a posture of defending your ego. There's no room for growth if you're looking at how to defend.
And you lose respect and credibility from others because they think, well, so you're not going to hold yourself accountable.
What's the impact that you've seen when people do this well? When they show vulnerability, when they figure out how to manage their ego, which of course will never go away, but they identify it and keep it in check. What do you think is the outcome?
You get more loyalty. You get more loyalty. You get more people to buy into you. In fact, you say this often, which is, I love it when we make mistakes because it's our opportunity to get people to be more loyal to us. So think about it in a different example. When someone is constantly on this like perfect, where they do everything right, it's hard to you kind of have this even keeled emotion and relationship and affinity to them. Whereas let's say they went through turbulent times and they messed up and now they're rebuilding again. This is why people love underdogs and that story and that hero. It's like, yes, you can be the hero again. People love that. And they have a stronger affinity because they've seen you be human. Again, going back to that, that's the piece of vulnerability. They've actually seen you go through hardships and that you didn't make the hardship about you. Rather, you still focused and you still thought about everybody else. You know the most about people during trying times. And so that to me has been, I would say, the biggest impact is when you think about, you keep that steady pace, you think about other people, you're going to get a lot more loyal following.
That's such a good point because that's when people see themselves in you because we are imperfect. We are walking around this planet wondering, am I good enough? And so if all you're getting let in on is that perfect even keel story, you can't relate to that. I can't relate to that. I can relate to when I see you screw up and then recover. That to me is inspiring. But if I'm just seeing you look flawless, I'm like, well, that's not achievable for me or approachable for me. So I do think that's true because there's so much more of an emotional connection there. And I personally believe, and we've seen this over the past couple of years, that the dedication, the genuine care that people have when they have been on that journey with you is so powerful and becomes an asset for the organization greater than buying everybody really nice swag or whatever else you can do from your pocketbook. If people give a shit, which is one of our culture commandments here at ALV, they will show up for you in ways you will not believe.
Yeah.
Okay. So last question for you before we open it up to the group for questions. Why do you think our partnership works? We are two people who are similar in a lot of ways, very different in a lot of ways, have our own funny little egos that do funny little things. And I tell people all the time, we were set up on a blind business date. Like we didn't know each other. We didn't know how this would meld. Why do you think it works?
Several reasons. One, there's an underlying trust. I have trust and faith that you are going to make a decision that's right for me, for you, and for the business. It's hard to me, that is like the foundation for anything, is like, if there's no trust, nothing will work out. I can delegate to you because there's trust. I don't have to be in marketing calls because there's trust. And also I don't have the skill sets behind it. So that's a big one. The other piece is we know, and I don't know if we're doing this consciously or subconsciously, we know when to play the other role. So Nicole and I go through these like quarter life crises moments that we talk about often. If Nicole's doing it, I'm not going to do it and be like, everything's okay. And if I'm doing it, Nicole's going to be my stable ground. Or when I'm thinking I'm being so risk averse and you're like, no, we really need to just push ourselves out there. Or if we're thinking too big and I'm like, no, we just need to be thinking about the practical component. I think we play this really nice counterbalance and yet push each other. We challenge each other. So that's the other piece of why I think it works so well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the trust piece, it's true. And you kind of gave subject matter examples. Like, I don't need to be in these meetings because I trust what you're doing in them. But I think probably even more than that is I trust that you have my back. And I trust that whatever decisions you're making are for the good of both of us and the business. And that's, I think, foundational to getting to trust all those other things in the meetings and in the whatever else.
Yeah.
Love you.
I love you. And I think you do that. Part of this is like, I feel safe enough to let my ego come out and to know that it's not going to damage our relationship and that you can call me out and say, rein it in. Like there's this respect where sometimes we approach relationships with this fear of, ooh, I have to be on eggshells because if I say this wrong thing, if I do this other thing, they might leave me or they might cancel the contract, whatever that type of relationship you have. Whereas I feel this strong sense of we've established trust and respect for one another, so much so that you've accepted me for who I am and that I could be at my worst and you'll still accept it and we'll be able to fix it.
Completely agree. Thanks, Foram. Okay. We are going to move on to start taking your questions. So start thinking about them. You are welcome to come off mute, turn on your camera and ask those in just a second, or you can go ahead and drop them in the chat and we will try to get through them. This could be about ego. This could be just a general question for Foram or for me. Ask away. We are open books, as you hopefully can see, and are more than willing to share just about anything that you might ask. So start to think through those questions. In the meantime, I want to talk to you a little bit more about coaching with Vida. As you can tell, we just kind of scratched the surface in terms of this topic, in terms of the way that you need to put intention and time and energy and partnership into uncovering these pieces and growing through this crazy thing that is entrepreneurship or leadership in general. We would love to support you if you are new to the community and just learning about Vida for the first time. As we mentioned in the beginning, we do leadership, career, and life coaching. We have incredible leadership coaches on our roster. And the first step to working with us is to speak with our relationship strategists who get to know you, who will get to know your ego and will get to know the things you're struggling with and working on, and pair you with the absolute right best coach on our team for you to start digging into this stuff and applying it and really making those behavioral shifts that are going to create that sustained change over time. Jillian, do you mind dropping in the link to book a consultation with us that I just mentioned? It's free. Our relationship strategists are, if I do say so myself, incredible. You will enjoy just talking to them for 30 minutes regardless, because they're amazing. But encourage you to consider that and think through what coaching could look like for you. As Foram said, neither of us would still be in this business if we didn't have each other or our coaches. And so it really, you don't have to go it alone. That is what this process is all about. That is what this community is all about. Get the support you need. You deserve it. Second thing I just want to mention, because it's kicked off today, we are doing a Black Friday sale, which is 50% off our e-courses. We have one on overcoming imposter syndrome, which I think we've established that we all need. So we will share the link to that as well. It, I think, is on sale through Monday. So if that's something you've been thinking about a lot, figuring out what your unique flavor of imposter syndrome is and how you can start to combat that, this course is awesome. I've obviously gone through it myself, probably should do so quarterly, but I promise you will benefit from it. So we will share the information on that as well. Foram, anything else you want to share?
I was thinking about, I was watching We Crashed. I love TV references. In fact, Pixar, Kung Fu Panda, like learn all life lessons through there. But I was thinking about another example of ego and the whole crash of WeWork and what happened. So Adam Newman, the co-founder, CEO of WeWork, they had this when they were going to go IPO. They were going to go IPO at like 60 something billion dollars. And in that moment, he let his ego get in the way because he really wanted to prove that he was different, that he was unicorn. And so he started meddling with some of the IPO stuff because he's like, I'm involved in everything. I'm Adam Newman. I need to put my brand, my stamp on there. For him, it became now, I need to prove something. He clouded his judgment. And that is why WeWork crashed. And they went from 60 something to like a 9 billion evaluation and IPO, and they're still struggling. This is a real life example of ego, is when you just get into a battle with yourself and that's all you see.
It's a really good point. And to be honest, you could probably point to a lot of the big public failures that have happened recently. Theranos, FTX, all of these, where we start to make these people deities almost. I mean, that's how it was with Adam Newman. The people worshipped him. And once you're putting yourself in that position where now you're infallible, then there's no room for vulnerability. There's no room for mistakes. So you're doing exactly what you described earlier, which is digging yourself in deeper to an already deep hole. And so I love that. And I think it speaks to why this work is so important to combat that, because before you know it, it's too late and you're on a sinking ship.
And that's why the power of coaching is somebody saying, hey, Foram, cut it out. Your ego's getting in the way and you're in the battle with yourself and you're not thinking about your business or you're not thinking about your customers. The checks and balances that a coach provides to me are most powerful when it comes to combating your ego and recognizing that it's showing up for you.
Absolutely. Okay. What questions do we have for Foram? Okay, from Betsy. You two have been lucky to have this partnership. True story. What is advice about establishing new partnerships? Do you want to go first?
No, I want you to go.
This is Betsy, and in particular around building the trust when you don't know each other well, or you're not sure that you're perfectly aligned with your objectives or strategies for that matter.
I have some thoughts and theories, of course, as I always do. I think a lot of co-founders, or particularly business relationships, people think about it clinically. They think about it like, well, I'm a really great marketer, so I need the tech person, or I'm really good at this component in the business, and this is the skill set gap. And I think that's smart. And also, you pretty quickly start doing a lot of stuff, all of you. And so I don't think that's the only thing that you should look at. I think you should think about what are the values that you have to share, and then what are the intangible kind of complementary skill sets that you have. So for Foram and me, we both have this kind of scrappy nature based on the way that we grew up, where we're never going to be excessive in how we build a company. We both have really strong work ethics, and that was clear from when we started about how we were going to pursue this company. So there's a lot of values-based things, even in how we make decisions for the team or for our customers, that we share, and it's critical that we're similar on. And then there are things like risk aversion and directness and all of these things where we're on opposite sides of the spectrum. And I think those complementary skill sets are just as valuable as, maybe me having a deeper financial background and her having much, obviously, more coaching expertise. So I think it's figure out where you need to be the same and figure out where you need to be different, and don't just think about the kind of tangible business skill sets. and work at it. Like we do this, we talk about it all the time, just like you do in any other important relationship. Anything you'd add for him?
That was brilliant.
Cool. Question from Ashley, which you may have already started answering. What are your best practices for checking yourself when you feel your ego enter the room? For example, defensiveness, aggression.
And I just posted I generally ask myself one question. Am I doing this because I'm trying to prove something or because it's right for the person or the business? Mm-hmm. And I think that question just helps me understand which frame of mind I've been acting with.
For sure. I agree with that. Like I said earlier, I listed some of the things that show up for me. And it's even something as simple as like, am I thinking about myself? Am I centering myself in this narrative that, to your point, is not about me? It's about the business. And so even just catching myself doing that, I already know I'm operating not from my ideal place. What other questions or thoughts?
Oh, thank you for that. I was just going to say, I talk about the trust advisor and the trust equation a lot. I'm a big fan of that. And this is by David Maister, the work that he does. And he talks about the trust equation, which is trust equals credibility. So that's our subject matter expertise, plus reliability. So that is are we consistent? If we said we're going to show up in 5 minutes, do we show up in 5 minutes? If we say, I'm going to send over this deliverable, do we do that? So it's, do they have reliability in our behavior? Plus intimacy. So credibility is what I know. Reliability is how I show up. Intimacy is what is the rapport that I'm building? All divided by self-orientation. Self-orientation defined by, am I thinking about, is this about me or is this about us and the mutual goals that we have? The moment you're talking about, if the question is this about me or is this about our mutual goal? And if the answer is that this is about me, ego is for sure showing up.
Jacqueline's question is, how do you recommend practicing ego awareness when it's not yet possible to test in the real world? In my case, I don't currently have employees.
Jacqueline, you must have friends or partners or somebody else that you have close relationship with. Have them. I think a great exercise could be, tell me about a time when you think you've seen me exhibit ego. And do a poll with several people that you may have worked with or that know you really well, so that you can start to understand. And then I would work backwards. If they say, well, it was in this particular moment, then you may think, okay, what was being said in that moment? Was there a particular context? Were there certain people that I was maybe feeling insecure with? And then maybe my ego came up. So what was that scenario? And you'll notice patterns. There's always patterns.
It's a great exercise. We should all probably do that. Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
Great question.
Yeah, really good question.
Nicole, if there's one ego that you can just completely get rid of in your life, one ego behavior, what would that be?
Comparison.
Oh, that's a good one.
If I find myself comparing, nothing good's coming from it. What about you?
That's a good one. When I feel like someone is questioning, I always take anyone's question about maybe my scope of responsibility as questioning me and my abilities. So they may be asking, so like they may be asking about a project or a question about a client, whatever it is. And I'm like, oh, so you're questioning my ability to deliver or my credibility? Totally not what's happening, but that's the leap I make. Raquel has a question. How did you guys first? Go ahead.
How did you guys first decide on how to divide and conquer tasks when starting up the business?
That's a good question. First, we kind of just did an inventory of like, what are our skill sets and what makes sense. And then we also thought about what are the components where we both need to be involved, where we can't divide and conquer. So that was the other part that was really important, is that, you know, I needed to make sure that if anything was impacting, if it was strategy or finance related or personnel related, even if Nicole may be the domain expert, we both needed to be on the same page. So we not only talked about our skill sets, but also around our, I would say the non-negotiable pieces where both of us needed to be involved.
That's a really good point, because I think there's the figuring out of what you need to do to get stuff done that I think sometimes feels a little bit more obvious based on skill set and kind of how we were aligned. And then there's what do we need to each inform each other about? What do we each need to weigh in? And then who has ultimate authority to make decisions if we're ever at a stalemate? And we repeat that conversation. We have it regularly as things change in the business. Like, do you want to be involved in this or do you not? And I think that ongoing iterating is really helpful. Great question. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for being here the day before, hopefully a holiday weekend for you all. This was really fun. Thank you, Foram. We're going to have you back if you'll come back.
Oh, of course.
Yes. Thank you all for being here. I can't wait to follow up with each of you. So thanks for your vulnerable questions, for sharing a little bit about what you're building, for sharing your contact information so that we can continue to build this community. I'm really grateful that you chose to spend your hour with us today, and hope that it was valuable to you and that you're going to walk away and think a little bit more about what those behaviors are for you and how we can start to manage those. So thank you again. Yes, Jillian, thank you for the links in the chat. We appreciate it. And we will see you soon. See you next month.
All right. And happy birthday, Nicole.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.